Rain cut the city into cold, narrow veins the night the children found him, an old man hunched under a broken streetlight, bleeding dignity with every breath as the world hurried past, unaware that fate was about to change 3 lives forever. Before the story carries you deeper, pause for a heartbeat. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in small acts that change everything, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Acts That Matter. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The boy noticed him first. He was thin in the way hunger makes children thin, all sharp elbows and careful steps, his jacket stitched so many times it looked like a map of old mistakes. His sister followed close, her hair braided with patience their mother once taught her, her eyes too old for her age. Between them they carried a paper bag of bread ends and bruised apples, a treasure gathered from a long day of favors and quiet begging. They had learned to read the streets like a book that never closed, learned which alleys offered shelter and which faces carried danger. That night, the rain had driven everyone inward, and the city's lights reflected on the pavement like 1,000 watchful eyes. The old man stood out because he did not move. He leaned on a cane with a hand that shook, his coat soaked through, his breath short, his gaze fixed on something far beyond the street. The children had learned early that help was risky. Kindness could cost you food, sleep, safety. Yet something about the man's stillness felt wrong, like a note held too long. They circled him with the caution of survivors, then stepped closer. His shoes were polished but worn thin, his coat expensive once but now frayed, the kind of clothes that told a story of a different life. His face carried lines etched by time and loss rather than poverty, and his eyes held a quiet fear that did not belong to the streets. The boy reached out, not touching, just close enough to feel the old man's tremor through the rain. The girl pulled her bag closer, calculating what could be spared. Hunger argued loudly, but the rain was louder. They did not ask questions. They had learned that questions could scare people away. They offered what they had. A piece of bread pressed into a hand that felt too cold. An apple wiped on a sleeve and held out like a promise. The old man's eyes flickered, surprise breaking through his exhaustion, and for a moment he looked like someone waking from a long, bad dream. He tried to straighten, failed, and leaned heavier on the cane. The children steadied him instinctively, one on each side, their small hands anchoring a stranger who suddenly felt lighter for being held. The walk to shelter was slow. Every step seemed to cost the man a year. The children guided him away from the open street into an old doorway where the wind eased and the rain softened to a whisper. The girl gave him her scarf, threadbare but warm, and tucked it around his neck with a tenderness she rarely allowed herself. The boy shared the last apple and watched the old man eat with the reverence of someone who knew hunger intimately. Time stretched. The city's noise dulled. The man's breathing steadied, and the children sat beside him, guarding the space as if it were their own. They learned his name only later, and even then it felt unimportant. What mattered was that he was human and hurting. He spoke of missing something he could not name, of walking too far, of thinking the city would remember him. His words drifted like fog, and the children listened, filling the gaps with empathy rather than understanding. When he shivered, they pressed closer. When his hands shook, they held them. The rain finally gave up, leaving the night clean and cold. Morning brought consequences. The children had stayed too long. The shelter they sometimes used had closed its doors. The bakery that offered scraps would not open for hours. Hunger returned, sharp and unforgiving. They weighed their options and chose the hardest one. They took the old man with them, navigating the streets toward a clinic that sometimes helped without asking for papers. It was a long walk. The men faltered twice. The boy's arm burned with effort. The girl's feet blistered in shoes too small. They did not complain. They had already decided. The clinic was crowded and tired. The air smelled of disinfectant and patients wearing thin. The children waited, holding the old man upright, their own needs shrinking beneath the urgency of his. When a nurse finally noticed them, the sight of 2 children propping up an elder softened something in her eyes. The old man was taken inside. The children were told to wait. They sat on the floor, backs against the wall, and shared a look that carried both relief and fear. Helping meant letting go, and letting go always felt like loss. Hours passed. The clinic hummed around them. A social worker brought them water and a sandwich cut into careful halves. They ate slowly, stretching the kindness, unsure what would happen next. When the old man returned, cleaned and wrapped in warmth, he looked different. Not healed, but present. His eyes searched until they found the children, and something like gratitude settled there, heavy and sincere. They left together. The city felt less hostile in daylight, its cracks visible but navigable. The old man insisted on walking a little on his own, pride reassembling itself one step at a time. They found a bench in a small park where leaves clung to autumn like stubborn memories. He rested, breathing the air as if it were new. The children waited, ready to help again if needed, but also ready to disappear back into their routines. This was how the streets worked. You crossed paths, you shared a moment, then you moved on. What the children did not know was that the man they had steadied was lost in more ways than one. His life before the rain had been carved from numbers and decisions, from boardrooms and quiet power. He had built companies, funded foundations, signed checks that changed skylines. Wealth had followed him like a shadow, faithful and heavy. Then came the losses that money could not bargain with, the days when rooms felt too large and nights too long. He had walked until the city blurred, until the weight of his name fell away and he became just a man with a cane and a question he could not answer. The streets had stripped him down to the essential, and the children had found him there. The days that followed tested everyone. The children returned to their circuits, gathering scraps, trading favors, learning to be invisible when necessary. The memory of the old man stayed with them, a warm ember against the cold. They wondered if he was safe, if he had found his way. They did not expect to see him again. The city rarely loops back so kindly. But life has a way of remembering generosity. Weeks later, a van pulled up near the alley where the children slept. It was clean and quiet, the kind of vehicle that belonged to a different world. A woman stepped out, her clothes simple but her posture assured. She spoke gently and asked for the children by description. Alarm flared, but curiosity followed. She explained that someone had been looking for them, someone who owed them more than words. The meeting happened in a place that felt unreal to the children, a building with warm light and rooms that smelled of polish and calm. The old man waited there, no cane now, his coat replaced by a sweater soft as forgiveness. He looked smaller in the large space, but his eyes were clear. He did not overwhelm them with gratitude. He did not tell them who he was. He thanked them simply, sincerely, as one human thanks another for being seen. Help arrived not as a spectacle but as structure. The children were offered stability, schooling, a safe place to sleep that locked from the inside. Their mother, who had been lost to the grind of survival and poor choices, was found and offered support rather than judgment. The process was careful and slow, designed to last. The children did not trust it at first. Trust had betrayed them before. But consistency has a language all its own, and slowly, day by day, the new life spoke it fluently. The old man visited sometimes, always without announcement, always without extravagance. He brought books and listened to the children read. He walked with them in the park and taught them the names of trees. He never mentioned money. He never needed to. What mattered was presence, the kind that stays. The children learned later, through whispers and headlines they barely understood, that he was a man of immense means. The revelation felt strange and distant, like learning a mountain had been watching you all along. It did not change how they remembered him that rainy night, fragile and human, grateful for an apple and a scarf. Years passed. The boy grew into his height and discovered a talent for building things, for turning raw materials into shelter and order. The girl found her voice and used it to advocate for those the city overlooked. They carried the memory of the night as a compass, a reminder that small hands can steady great weight. The old man watched from a respectful distance, funding quietly, intervening rarely, proud in a way that did not need applause. Near the end of his life, the old man returned to the street where they had found him. The broken streetlight had been fixed. The rain came and went. He stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, and smiled at the memory of being held up by children who had nothing to spare and gave anyway. He understood then what his wealth had never taught him. That dignity is restored not by money but by mercy. That salvation often arrives in the hands of the poor. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite fate, please take a moment now to like this video, share it, and engage with it. Your support helps these stories reach those who need them most. Before we close, please comment below with one small act of kindness you believe can change a life. The children never knew the full morning did not arrive gently for the children. It crept in cold and pale, sliding between buildings like an unwelcome reminder that survival did not pause for kindness. The bench where they had rested the night before felt harder now, unforgiving against tired backs and empty stomachs. The city had resumed its rhythm, cars hissing over wet roads, shopkeepers lifting shutters, strangers moving past with eyes fixed forward. To the world, nothing had changed. Yet inside the children, something had shifted, subtle but powerful, like the first crack in ice before it breaks. The boy woke first, as he always did, trained by years of necessity. He counted their remaining bread, pressed flat in the bag, and calculated how long it might last if they were careful. Hunger was a familiar companion, but today it felt different, quieter, as if waiting. The girl sat up slowly, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her gaze drifting instinctively to the space where the old man had been. Relief washed over her when she remembered the clinic, the warmth, the way his breathing had steadied. Relief was rare for them, and it felt almost dangerous, like something that could be taken away at any moment. They moved through the city with the practiced efficiency of children who had learned to be invisible. They avoided crowded streets and lingered near back doors where kindness sometimes slipped out unnoticed. The boy ran small errands for shopkeepers who pretended not to see his hunger, paying him in coins or leftovers. The girl helped an elderly woman carry groceries up narrow stairs, earning a smile and a piece of fruit. These moments stitched the day together, fragile threads holding back despair. Yet the memory of the stranger followed them everywhere. It surfaced in quiet pauses, in the way the girl tightened her scarf against the wind, remembering how she had given it away without thinking. It echoed in the boy's arms, still aching faintly from supporting a grown man's weight. They wondered where he was now, whether he was warm, whether someone was watching over him the way they had. They did not speak of it aloud. Some hopes felt too tender for words. As the day wore on, clouds gathered again, heavy and dark. Rain threatened, tapping warnings against windows and metal roofs. The children found shelter beneath an overpass where other forgotten souls gathered, each carrying their own story etched into tired faces. There was comfort in numbers, even when everyone was struggling. The boy shared what little they had left with a younger child who shivered beside them. The girl watched, pride and fear tangled in her chest. Giving always felt right, but it also reminded her how close they were to having nothing. By evening, exhaustion weighed them down. Their feet ached, their stomachs protested, and the future loomed like a wall they could not see over. They spoke quietly about tomorrow, about which streets might be kinder, which places to avoid. There was no room for dreams, only plans. Still, beneath the practical talk, a new thought lingered, unspoken but alive. Maybe the world was not entirely closed to them. Maybe their small act had mattered more than they knew. Across the city, in a place far removed from their reality, the old man sat alone in a clean, quiet room. Fresh clothes rested on his skin, and a warm meal lay untouched before him. His body was safe, cared for, but his mind returned again and again to the children. Their faces haunted him, not with guilt, but with something deeper. He saw their thin arms, their steady hands, the way they had looked at him not as a burden but as a person. It unsettled him more than any loss he had known. For the first time in years, he felt shame that had nothing to do with failure and everything to do with forgetting. Forgetting what it meant to need help. Forgetting how powerful compassion could be when stripped of pride. Lying back against soft pillows, he closed his eyes and made a decision that felt heavier than any business deal he had ever signed. This time, he would not look away. Night fell again, and rain finally broke, drumming against concrete and steel. The children huddled close beneath the overpass, listening to the city breathe around them. The girl rested her head on her brother's shoulder, fighting sleep. The boy stared into the darkness, alert, protective. Neither of them knew that forces had already been set in motion, that lives were quietly shifting because of a moment of mercy beneath a broken streetlight. They only knew that tomorrow would come, as it always did, demanding strength they were never sure they had. And yet, for the first time in a long while, tomorrow did not feel entirely hopeless. Somewhere in the vast, uncaring city, a connection had been made, thin as thread, but strong enough to hold the promise of change.